What's up, everybody? My name is Daniel, and this is another episode. Okay, so basically, in this video, we're going to be going through classes again. In this video, I'm going to be going through an example of classes. I'm going to be explaining, really going into depth about private member variables, and I'm also going to be going into detail about mutators and accessors, which are a thing in classes. Okay, you need to understand mutators and accessors, or getters and setters is what they are called otherwise in classes. Okay, so basically that's it, and without further ado, let's get into it. First things first, just create a new project, click on File, New, and create a new project, C++ project, and then let's get into it. So before you actually start following me and typing what I type, I just want to give an example about private and public member variables. Okay, so public member variables are what I'll just make an example. So what is an object? An object is anything that can be described. So for example, you can say a car is an object, a person is an object, a house is an object, right? So classes allow us to create multiple objects. So I can create a house as a class. I can create a class of a house, and then I can have a lot of houses that basically are the same type of house, because this one class allows us to create a lot of objects, right? So with a person, you have public information about that person and private information. Let me give you an example, and you don't need to type this out. This is just for demonstration purposes. So if I say class person, and then I say public and also private, right? And then in public, I can just say it's a function that is, or maybe a variable string outfit, for example. That's public information. When you see a person in the streets, already you can see that, oh, okay, this person has this particular type of outfit. And then what is private information about that person? Maybe it's their first name, for example, or in their date of birth. That's private information that you don't immediately know as soon as you see someone or as soon as you meet someone. You see, so that's the difference. You want to keep the private information private, and only release this information if the other person, or if the actual person wants that information to be released. For example, if we can have a function called void output, for instance, and then basically this function is gives info about their private details, for instance. So this function is the one that's actually going, if this function is called, this function then releases information about the first name, the date of birth, and any other private information that this person is willing to give out. So private remains private so long as this class is willing to actually give it out. But if it's not, then it won't give it out. Okay, so that's how we protect things in programming. So even, let's say, an example of a house, you can see the house, you can see, maybe you can see from the outside what the color of the house is. You can see, you know, the design of the house, you know, if it's a flat roof or an arched roof or whatever. However, what you don't know is what's inside the house. You don't know how many bedrooms are inside. You don't know what color is the kitchen. You don't know what colors the tile, if they have tile or they have wooden flooring and stuff like that. So that's just the difference. So until that owner of the house wants to give you that information, you will never know. So we're not going to be using this class person as an example, and now you can actually start following. We're about to actually start working on top of the class called day of year, just to in continuation, so that we can understand these private and public variables a lot more better based off of previous lessons, right? But even if this is the first time watching, you don't need to worry. Okay, so I'm going to create a class called day of year, right? Create day of year. I'm gonna say public, right? This is where all my public information is gonna go, and this is private. This is all my private information is gonna go. Now, in a day of year, basically, this is a calendar, and if you look at a calendar and you choose one date on it, say example the 1st of March, you basically have the month of the day, and you also have the day, right? So you have the month, which is the 3rd, right? The month, if we're talking about March, is the 3rd. If we're talking about April, it's the 4th. And then the day could be any day, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, all the way till 31st. Okay, so what we want to do now is we're going to create a function in the public. This function is basically going to output this date, right? So I'm going to say void output. Okay, and remember, the function name can be anything that you want it to be. Okay, and yeah, and also you can create more variables inside the underneath the public. It doesn't just need to be functions. You just keep note of that. Similarly, in the private section, we can have functions. In later videos, you'll understand what I mean by that, or what type of functions we could have. They're also named helper functions, but for now, let's just keep it simple. Okay, so let me give an example and maybe initialize this class. Okay, so I'm gonna say day of year, and I'm gonna say my birthday, right? So I've initialized my class, or sorry, I've instantiated my class. That's my birthday, which is the day. So I'm gonna give it I'm gonna set the day, and I'm gonna set the month. Okay, so I'm gonna say my birthday dot month, and you'll see something very interesting come up. And then I'll say my birthday dot day equals to maybe the 5th of April. Okay, so in previous examples, without this private member, if I remove this private, you will see that these red squiggly lines disappear, because now everything is under public. If I remove that private, that means that everything underneath here is public. However, if I bring back the private, as you can see, now that means that these fall under this scope, which is private, and now everything here now has squiggly lines. Why is this? Because C++ or any other programming language won't allow you to set things that are private. It's like you as a person walking up to another person, and you just decide that their person's name is not James anymore, but instead their name is Sam. You can't do that, especially since you don't even know what name they have, and you don't have the authority to go and change their name. Okay, so this is not allowed. Okay, however, there are other avenues in which you can go to change details of this object. Okay, my birthday's object, there are ways in which you can change it. So, and how you can change this information or set this information to begin with is through things called mutators and excesses. As you can see here at the very beginning of this program, I have comments and things that I've commented out. Okay, so we're going to go through mutators and excesses. So what are mutators? Mutators are things that you set. So we want to be able to set this because we were unable to set this information like this, right? So we need a way in which we can actually set it. So we need to, inside of the class itself, create functions inside the public section, right? We're going to have a function that actually allows us to set it. So I'm going to say void, I'm going to say set date, for example. I'm going to say set date, and I want this function to take in the month and the day that we want to set, right? I'm going to say new day, new month, and I'm going to say new day. Okay, so these, we're going to say these are integers, integer new month and integer new day. Okay, so now I'm going to scroll all the way down, and I need to declare, I will need to write the definition of this function called set date. Let's not worry about the output for now. We'll do that towards the end. Okay, let me remove this because this doesn't work. And then maybe all the way down here, I'm gonna write the definition of these functions, right? I'm gonna write the implementation. So how do we write the implementation? Remember to start with the type void. It's a void function, and then write the class name, and then the scope, and then we're gonna say set date, right? Just please don't forget these two colons right here. Okay, don't forget these are actually called, and I'll tell you just now, scope resolution operators. I'll just leave it here. You don't need to know this information, but you know, if you are a geek like that and you really want to know, that's what it's called. And then we can go on and just finish off the creation of our function. So, but then remember, we need to, when you create a function, you need to insert the it needs to match the one that you created in the initial class here. Okay, so I'm just gonna paste. Okay, I need to get rid of those hints. So there we go. So now we've created the class function. Sorry, yes, the class function. It's called a member function. Sorry, yes, a member function. I can't believe myself today. So what we want to do is that we want to actually set the date. So what we want to do is that we want to set the month and we want to set the date. So I'm just gonna go here and say month. It automatically knows what I'm talking about, and then I'm gonna give it the new month that we've gotten from the class. And then similarly with the day, I'm gonna say day equals to new day, like that. So now this should work. Okay, so this function should be able to set the new month and the new day. So if I were to go here then now and say, okay, my birthday dot set date, okay, set date, I'm calling this function on the name of my object, which is my birthday. The object is my birthday. I can now pass in the actual figures. So I can say, okay, my birthday is in, the month is April, and also the date, maybe let's just say the date is the 10th of April, for instance. Okay, so now can you see there's no red squiggly lines? So this actually is allowed. Now let's write the output, and then let's see if this program works. I'm just gonna copy this output, and I'm gonna go scroll all the way down and write another function, void day of year, scope resolution operator, and then I'm gonna write output, and the output takes no parameters, and I'm gonna see out your okay, I'm gonna say date is, I'm gonna say pass in the, okay, I'm gonna say date is month, the month is, I'm gonna say month, and then I'm gonna say day is, and I'm gonna pass in the day, like that. Okay, so date is, the month is month, day is day. So this obviously will trigger the actual month that you've passed into this class here inside the private members or private variables here, okay, of whatever object that you've declared and you're calling this function upon. So I've set the date. Now I want to call the function called it will be my birthday dot output, and I'm gonna run that. I'm gonna run this, right? So I'm gonna run, and let's see what it gives us. And there we go. It says date is month 4, day is 10. So this works. This works. Now I'm going to explain exactly what we did here one more time, just so that you guys understand. Okay, so let me just make this fit on the screen. All right, just one more. All right, now let me explain this from the beginning going downwards. Okay, so we create our class, we separate the private and the public, right, side of things. So we want to differentiate between things that are private in an object and things that are public. So things that are private, we create variables, and these variables, now because that they are private, we don't go the traditional way of declaring them. We need some form of other way to declare them, because this main function, because it communicates with so many other parts of programs or imported programs, and it's basically the basis of interacting with the actual user, then we don't want it to have security vulnerabilities, right? So we want to keep things private in a class, and some things we want to give them as public. So because of that, now since we set things to be private, we are not allowed then to just set things however we want. That's the whole point. So what we do instead is that we now need to create a function, right, in order to set new things, right? So this function is a setter, right? And then you also need to create another function called a getter if you wanted to get information. For example, if I say if I were to say cout, and I'll say my birthday dot month, and I want to output this, I'm not going to be allowed to do that, because again, month and day are private. What I would need to do is I would need to create another function called a getter that is going to allow me to actually retrieve that information. In this case, we have output, and output allowed us to actually retrieve this information inside this function. If we just wanted maybe particularly the month, for instance, right, just like how we did here, we can create a function called a getter, and we can just say, okay, this function returns an integer, right, because the month is an integer, and we can just say get month. We just want the month. This is a getter function, right, and it doesn't take any parameters. We just want to get the particular month. And if we write this function over here, we'll say it's an integer, and it's from the class day of year, and it's get month, doesn't take any parameters, and then inside of it we're going to say return month. For example, it just returns the month. It already knows what the month is. The month is this variable right here. So now, instead of calling cout my birthday dot month, what I will do now is that I'll say my birthday dot get month, and now we're calling the function and not the variable itself, and this should allow us to get the actual month. Now if I run this program again, you'll see we get our usual programming, which is this function called output that has been called, and also we get the actual 4, which is the month that is been given to us from this line right here. So guys, without further, well, what am I saying? What I wanted to say actually is that's basically it from this video. This has been classes, differences between private member variables and public, and also mutators and accessors, okay, and the scope resolution operator. So if you have any questions, please let me know, and yeah, please like, and if you're on YouTube, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video where we continue our journey with classes. Okay, all right.